Hello and welcome to part 2 of Belgium in Hearts of Iron 4, where we started preparing last time to stop an expected blitzkrieg attack. We've got a whole bunch of anti-tank guns, artillery, anti-aircraft guns, fortifications, and we've just started making ourselves a proper air force as well. Which brings us to about the middle of 1939, so now we're going to see how all this stuff performs in action. Towards the end of the year I started cheekily trying to get some tanks out. I've been gradually researching tanks and we've got to the point when we're about to finish researching a modern, useful tank. So I figured we'll cheekily have that being produced in the background once the fighting starts. And here is our first armoured division being put to the field, just a bunch of tanks and motorised infantry. They're not really going to be ready in time for the predicted action time, but you might note we're actually after the historical start of World War II and it hasn't started yet. So the historical focus mode of the game doesn't guarantee absolute accuracy. But here we are a couple of months later when Germany invades Poland. So if it's going to go historically, that means we've got a short time before they attack us. Basically, once Poland's dead, they'll all be over here trying to attack France, and part of attacking France means attacking us. So now it's time for the most difficult part of the campaign, that is, trying to get my troops to go back to our fortifications. I found this extremely confusing. The issue we've got right now is because I've defined the edge of my territory as the front line, because the front line, quote unquote, has to be your border with someone else. So I can't pull them off the quote unquote front line to make a new one in anticipation of that area becoming the front line later. What I can do is this thing I'm trying to do now, assign a fallback line, which says on the tooltip you can use it to defend within friendly territory. The issue is I can't get them to fall back to the fullback line. I've also put multiple fullback lines on top of each other because it doesn't work like I think it does. Overall, having a lot of trouble. I believe what I could do here is select that bin on the end of the menu I'm looking at now. I think the bin icon lets you delete strategic things, and I might be able to delete the fact that our front line is over there. I'm currently trying to use the front line tool to move it, or select front line and then like control and right click on something to unfront line, stuff like that. Unfortunately, clicking on the bin didn't come to mind in this case, so I've ended up creating multiple front lines on top of each other here or something. I eventually got out of this whole thing by selecting area defense, which causes them to abandon the front line to defend all of our territory at once, and then resetting the fullback line, causing them to then stop the area defense and go to the fullback line. So over time, we've now manned our fortified river crossing, and we've also got our northern border with Netherlands fortified, because I didn't expect them to last very long. We can actually spy on the Nazis and see they are planning to go around Maginot with their focus tree, which includes going through the Netherlands and Belgium, as those tooltips note. So something bad's going to happen, and eventually they do declare war on us. This very nicely actually puts me in with the Allies. I mentioned last time I was worried about the fact I couldn't even get the most basic of cordial relations with the other countries around me. But now that stuff's hit the fan, it seems we just get drawn into the Allies anyway, so we're in military alliance with everyone else and they're going to come over and help us a little bit. In the meantime, we sit back and see if our defences do anything. At first the Germans do capture the bit I abandoned, but they stop once they reach the river line. So in some ways that means it's working. We've stopped their advance. They're not willing to cross the river to attack us here. That's good news. It's at least buying us some time, and that time will be useful because France and Britain are gradually moving troops around, and many of those troops are coming up specifically to defend us, so we're getting stronger with this delaying action. The Netherlands, though, is being attacked by the enemy. They obviously forgot to fortify. They didn't know about the future. So the Germans will be able to get in there, but yes, very nicely, we're safe sitting back here. Our air force is engaged in combat, doing stuff, although it's not immediately obvious what. They're probably helping somewhere in some way. Now here's me messing things up again. What I wanted to do is fold my line around to the north, again anticipating that the Netherlands won't hold very long, because we've got fortifications there we can use in the forests on our northern border. Figured that would be a good idea, but my attempts to extend the line that way end up kind of resetting the line, making the line overwrite and cross over itself, and we have multiple lines on top of each other now. Plus, the AI decides where in the line your troops are going to go, and they can decide to not man parts of the line, and that's what's happening here, where it says no divisions on our northern border, because our commander's just keeping all the divisions at the existing locations and not assigning them up there. Not really sure how it works, and I think you can micromanage it in some way to force divisions to go to certain parts of the line. I tried that a bit later and then found the AI would reverse my decision and just pull them back off because it's doing its own thing. Overall, I was extremely disappointed with how limited your control of the armies is. I think you can do something like control clicking to permanently override the AI, but I didn't see the tooltips about that until well after this fighting here had happened. So our men ended up unentrenching themselves, walking backwards and forwards, and then not actually achieve anything after all of my movements. So I guess it's lucky the Germans aren't really bothering to attack us because we are really shambolic behind our fortified lines. Soon I spotted this thing over on the right that lets you see what's going on to some extent with the aerial combat. Looks like we're in trouble because the enemy have 2,000 fighters attacking this region. It looks really bad with us only having 200, but that bar towards the top of this little panel suggests that things are about even. And that's because it doesn't count in all the allied fighters, which do show up if you use the tooltip there. So actually, there's loads of stuff here. It's about even at the moment. Our fighters are just contributing somewhat, and we're not really losing any of them, so that's handy. We are though having some trouble with our allies, because our allies insist on making these losing attacks. They keep counterattacking the Germans even across the river, and losing, I guess, so that's probably not going to be helping us out, but at least they have actually stabilized the front line. We're not being pushed back at all. Looks like the Germans are now going to attack Denmark and Norway and such, so that should help us out a bit in that they might take stuff over there and not attack us with it. That might have contributed to the enemy letting up with their attack, and our allies, the British and the French, put tons of troops along the front line, and the Netherlands troops are also still alive somehow at this stage. So we've established a stable front line, and it kind of seems like things aren't being all that blitzkrieg. We've actually stopped things and we're just looking at each other across the battle lines. My front line isn't technically a front line. I could now assign it as a front line, I believe, because it's in the right place for me. But I didn't think of that. I just figured I'll leave my troops there, which might actually be a problem. I don't know. I think your troops might not know to defend if there isn't a front line assigned in front of them, something like that. Anyway, we did actually see some combat after a while. Some enemies tried to make the river crossing and attack. This panel is way too small for the amount of information on it, but if you go through all the tooltips, it becomes more and more possible to see what's going on in there. I didn't, obviously, in this case, but it looks like we're winning. The green circle means a good fight is happening, the red circle means a bad fight, and a lot of the bad fights are where our allies are trying to assault across the river, or where the enemy are attacking unfortified positions, such as the gaps on either side of our line. So while the Maginot Line plan is working for us, it's got the same weakness as the actual Maginot Line in that there are unfortified parts on either side that the enemy can attack, and they're doing that right here. So slowly we're going to be losing battles, but where they're trying to cross the river and attack our forts, they're doing badly. Or at least, I presume they're doing badly, not that I understand these fights. The circle says something good is happening, although we don't appear to actually be killing the enemy or making them go away or anything like that. Although, on the other hand, they're not killing us either. We're remaining at maximum strength throughout these battles. I don't actually know what strength means. I have this vague feeling it might just mean how many guns you have, not necessarily how, alive you are or how much morale you have or something like that. I don't know. So we carry on now to later in the war, when the Netherlands is gradually being taken by Germany, but very gradually, and they do keep attacking our fortified lines but generally achieving nothing. And here I'm like, well, Netherlands is going to fall. I need to actually get our guys to fall back and take up positions on our forts facing north. What I had hoped was that the AI would start moving troops there. As the kind of danger level increased, they'd realize they need to man this area. Unfortunately, I don't think it works like that. I need to manually assign them, but so far, what I'm trying to do is roll back the line I've drawn so far to make it shorter, and I keep trying to use the full back line tool to do that, because I figured, well, the thing that allows you to draw the line will allow you to undraw the line and shorten it because it's gotten out of control with me clicking all over the place. We've got lines on top of lines, and I'm just making it worse every time I try to figure out what keyboard button I need to hold down to reverse it or something like that. There's a little tooltip that says escape to cancel or something, and I was like, oh, do I have to hold down escape while dragging to cancel my fallback order? That's the sort of thoughts going through my head as I try to battle with the UI. And yes, going for that bin icon is what I'm supposed to do, I think, but I just figured that the tool that makes things is the tool that unmakes them as well, and I didn't even try the bin thing. So the enemy close in, and we still have failed really to properly assign divisions. Here's me starting to give manual orders, but we get that problem I mentioned earlier, where if you just right-click to tell a troop to move somewhere, they'll get there and then they'll go back according to the AI's desire for where they should be. You have to like hold Control or Shift or something while right-clicking to make it an assignment rather than a temporary movement order. Something. There needs to be more tutorial. It took 2 hours to get through it, but it wasn't enough. So here we are, trying to set up some form of defensive line as the Germans get closer and closer. Our allies are just killing themselves out there. Looks like I've accidentally sent my cav in to fight in the Netherlands at some point. I think I tried to get them out, but they couldn't come out because they were in combat constantly. And we move on again to when the Germans are actually in a pretty decent position because they have a chance to attack me I didn't think about. With the Netherlands, there's a little sliver of territory on the west side there that allows them to walk all the way around to the back of Belgium without touching my fortification lines. So that's a big issue. Also allows them to take my airfield. I completely didn't notice this. I figured that where my fortifications are was going to be the front line. But no, so the Maginot line plan has failed in a spectacularly Maginot-ish fashion. Even the bits I thought were fortified weren't upon further inspection. It's happening again, ladies and gentlemen. But that said, where the Germans are attacking my prepared positions, they're losing constantly. All of the green circles are flashing up. I don't really know what the number means, but it looks like the enemy are failing to take our positions. I figured we could actually hold here, but there's something that I guess I still don't understand going on, and I think it's something to do with the organization bar, which is beside the strength bar. You can barely see these bars, they're way too small, but our guys have some kind of organization stat, and what I presume at the time of recording is that organization can be interpreted as something like morale, in that if you don't have any organization, your troops will flee engagements automatically. And I think that explains the phenomena we see as the fight goes on, because we just appear to be constantly winning all of the battles, yet the enemy sometimes will just move into our territory and push us back anyway. I think the whole conundrum stems from the definition of the word winning, really. I believe you can get a green circle saying you're winning the battle, even if your morale is dropping faster than the enemy's, so while maybe you're killing them as they come in, the battle will end with them winning, even if it's a winning battle for you, if you know what I mean. Especially because the circle doesn't have that much foresight. It says you're winning until one of your troops that was on 1 morale when the battle started just retreats and suddenly you're losing, which is what happened at the top just there. You might have seen one of our easily winning battles turned into one that we're just about losing. And that's going to be an issue for us, obviously. I didn't really know what was going on while this was happening. I was just sort of watching, attempting to give the odd order and hoping that something good would happen. I knew I'd successfully fortified this direction, so we have some unknown level of debuff being applied to the enemy right now. And I hoped that would allow us to overcome their numbers, especially with allied troops in the area. But there are cases where it's not, because our troops are walking backwards and forwards quite a lot and not always fighting, and they're also not always entrenched. You can see on the left, looking at our army, we've actually lost virtually nothing. All of those orange bars beside the unit being their strength seems to indicate that things are going well, but morale is low in some cases. It keeps dropping down in the combats, and up north you can see we are just losing in general as the enemy press harder and harder. I'm guessing the fortified line isn't fortified enough, and we'll come back to that in a second. And I'm also on the verge now of a great discovery. Here it is. I just clicked on the bin button while attempting to stop my troops garrisoning the middle of my territory, and successfully worked out that I could delete old orders for troops to fall back to Brussels and things like that. Anyway, we plough on and the enemy plough into us specifically. My cavalry army's taken a couple of the infantry divisions by accident there, and they're all on low morale. A lot of our troops are going to be wandering about at this stage, and the river crossing defences are holding somewhat, but the normal attacks against our fortified positions in the north are allowing the enemy to get in eventually, even with our allies supporting. I'm trying here to get some kind of grip on what is going on here. Looking at the tooltips, we have a lot of numbers, and if you mouse over the number, a lot more numbers come up explaining what the numbers are, and the numbers change constantly hour to hour as well. So I would rate this as a very difficult to understand battle system, especially for one you don't have control over. It's just kind of happening. We appear to be losing. I can't confidently say why we're losing at this stage. I guess that's the problem. I'd like to understand things. This is where things go from here. They just started killing us, and then Belgium capitulated. I thought you'd get like an option or something to negotiate your surrender, but it just happens. So that's going to be the end of that, really. It causes all of your troops to despawn. So while you can see I had, by the end, formed a front line at the bottom of Belgium with our allies, we've gone now, so our allies won't be able to hold. Awkwardly, we just did the national focus. Why we fight on the same day we surrendered, so I guess that didn't come in very useful in the end. And that was that, really. We're actually not out of the game, though. The fight continues, because we still control our big blob down in Africa. And I started thinking maybe we can do something with this, because it does actually have one factory, and because of some of the national focuses, I think, it's managed to gain some infrastructure and some factory building slots. Unfortunately, I found that I wasn't allowed to use the slots even after they'd appeared, and I wasn't allowed to use the military factory or civilian factories here either, probably because I'm supposed to be dead or something. So not much happened. And when I looked back up, it appeared that Germany had conquered France, so it was all us holding the enemy back. We did cause their invasion to be very much not a blitzkrieg. It ended up taking them something like 6 months to get past us, so that's an achievement of sorts. But I didn't leave the campaign feeling hopeless. I felt like I'd learned enough during it that it might be possible to actually do, and that's why I just immediately started again. I lowered the difficulty to try and help me out in some passive way. I think that makes you research things a bit faster and maybe build things faster. And this time I had a more clear plan. I knew that we didn't really need to fortify the river that much because the debuff the enemy gets from the river is already pretty big. So I'm going to focus my construction time on much more heavily fortifying the northern approach, and of course fortifying that little back entrance along the beach in the west so they can't get into our airfields as easier. And to avoid orders chaos, I just put my men where I want them to be when the war is happening immediately, and now I'm just going to literally leave them there. I don't think that's the best idea, but we're still developing knowledge of this game. I'm a purist, by the way. You might be wondering why I haven't just looked up a strategy guide or something, and it's because I always want to see what the game allows you to know from within the game itself, to see what the quote-unquote intended knowledge is, rather than looking things up, although we're going to break that rule shortly actually. Anyway, things are going better with my new in-game strategy improvements. We're getting our political reforms in a more appropriate order, picking the things we need at the right times this time, since I have a little more foresight on what they do. We avoid having to take a military theorist by just being in exercise mode the whole time, giving us all the army experience we need to make our army. And as for making our army, I was looking over like the stats. One thing that didn't occur to me even at this point is that the way these divisions work is much simpler than I figured it was. Your division is actually kind of one thing, and you shouldn't be thinking of it as a collection of many things. It's just like an average. So the division is like a man who is the average stats of everything in the division. For example, if the division has tanks in it, the man, the infantry, are considered to be armored and things like that. So it's just a big blob that has numbers, and really you're just trying to get the numbers on the right to be some good ones. What are good ones? Well, that's a whole new level of analysis, and for that I actually did start looking it up on the internet, and in particular everybody was focusing on the unassuming stat in the middle, the combat width. So I ended up creating this style based off a recommendation where it's mostly infantry and artillery, making sure the combat width doesn't go above 20, because apparently once it gets higher, it limits the number of total divisions that fight at once, and getting a 4th division on top of your 3-division fight to be actually fighting will increase your stats by 33% and things like that. So you want to have lots of divisions that fit neatly into the quote-unquote size of a battle. It claimed the size of a battle was 80, which is why you want to go for something like 20 or 40 for your divisions. Doesn't appear to be the case as far as I can tell, but I actually can't tell. We'll take a look at that in a second. Here we are with the war actually starting. It started a bit earlier than last time, but I was still much better prepared. I had a bigger air force, much more fortifications, we've got tanks on the way, and I had more divisions out as well, just more infantry in general. We've also got, I believe, the upgraded artillery rather than the level 1 artillery I was using before. The issue we have though is that this version of the war went quite a lot worse actually. I noticed the British didn't bring their army onto the mainland, and the French didn't go and bolster up the Netherlands like they did last time because, well, they appeared to be fighting in front of my defensive line, which was a waste of time. I think they're trying to get to the Netherlands, but just not going via a very good route. And what we saw is perhaps just by sheer RNG, the Netherlands fell really fast in a matter of weeks, so very quickly we were the front line. And here I am again, analysing these battles, trying to see what's going on, and it's certainly the case that we're losing organisation very quickly. The enemy are also losing organisation, but they just bring in a different unit with more organisation to keep the fight going. And I'm guessing as long as the fighting continues, your morale just continuously drops. So they don't actually have to be killing us, which indeed they're not. They're just causing us to get bored of this whole affair and then leave our fortified position, which will eventually be our undoing. The units are going to leave like one by one, so one unit will rout, but then that starts giving the enemy a little bit more pressure, and as they just put more and more stuff in, it gets worse and worse. And I also noticed that my forts don't appear to be doing very much. I was getting very low fortification debuffs on the enemy. I've got level 4 forts here, which should be roughly halving all of their stats. On top of the halving they're getting from crossing the river, I imagined that would mean we're going to be in a real good position if they attack. But no, they are causing a little bit of a kerfuffle. Again, not in damage, but in organisation. There's clearly a whole bunch of mechanics here that are behind the scenes, aren't communicated by this thing I'm looking at. Or maybe they would be communicated if it was bigger, I don't know, maybe we just need more information from the tooltips to come out onto the screen. Overall, it's an annoying position because I felt like I came into this second attempt at the campaign with more game knowledge and a clear plan, but after looking at it, I understand it less than I thought I did. Like, I figured after the first playthrough I kind of get this, and then after looking at it I was like, okay, I definitely don't get this. Like, this is my superior position, but we're still losing this fort defense across a river. Our guys appear to have lower stats, perhaps because the divisions are smaller than they were before, but also adding artillery and anti-aircraft guns to divisions, which is what I had on top of these guys last time, reduces their health and organisation, which makes them worse defensively, which is why I was trying to not do that, according to someone on the internet. Overall, it's all gone out the window. We're losing the fight that I thought would be the most winnable of the fights, and we might as well cut to how this war ends. We hold on for quite a long time actually in a couple of pockets, and then eventually surrender. Everything was dead by that point, and France had already surrendered, so we outlasted France this time. That's an achievement of sorts. What I don't know is how close were we to being able to do something there? Did we just need a few more divisions and we would have been able to hold those positions? We have, because of course it's all a butterfly effect. Once you lose one part of the fort, you will suddenly be almost guaranteed to lose all of it. You need the entire line to hold at the same time, so they can't just go behind you. Anyway, I was feeling very downtrodden after this because while the first time didn't work, I didn't really expect it to work because I had no idea what I was doing. And then I came in with the easy difficulty, with the idea what I was doing, and the much stronger economy game early on. We had more weapons, a bigger army, better weapons, more fortifications, and we got way more owned than we did before. And I suppose, as mentioned, the main thing is I don't really understand why. However, this didn't completely destroy my morale. I did enjoy playing the game apart from when it went badly, in which case it suddenly turned to sort of retrospectively have not been fun because it was all for nothing. But I did want to find a way to do this. I kept feeling like this must be possible. And the next thing I did was look at some mods, and I saw there's a popular mod called Road to 56. In this mod, Belgium is like a major faction where it's kind of designed to actually be played, whereas before we were one of the ones the game was saying not to play as. You have a whole focus tree with a bunch of different things you can do, and I think it's going to be a more powerful focus tree. I haven't analysed it that closely, but maybe it is, allowing us to become more powerful more quickly. You also start further down the tech tree. You start with a bunch of stuff already unlocked, and you start with 4 research slots instead of 3. So what I thought is, I'll try and make a part 3 where I come back as a more powerful version of Belgium, and maybe then I'll find a way to make this work. If I don't find a way to make it work, maybe I won't bother making a video on that, so this might be the end of the Belgium attempts. We'll see, we'll see. Feel free to spam your advice and such in the comments. It absolutely will be too late. I will have already made the 3rd video if it's going to exist by the time this one comes out. So it's too late. But if you spam advice, it might be useful for me coming back to do a more serious campaign as someone else, maybe as one of the bigger factions that has more of a chance to influence things. Well, we'll see, we'll see. Do what you want. I'm out of here. What a disaster it's been in my attempt to keep Belgium alive.